Hi guys, it's the Automatinator here, and today I'm going to show you how to initialize or pre-populate 5 of the most common types of collections in UiPath: data tables, arrays, lists, IEnumerables, and dictionaries. Let's get started. So to make this quick, I've gone ahead and set up this project beforehand so I can just demo it straight through. For those of you who are here for a quick fix, you have one particular type of variable, that collection type variable that you're looking to know how to initialize. You're looking to initialize a list, and that's all you're here for. Go ahead and look down in the description for this video. I will include timestamps to the sections where we'll be talking about each of the different how to initialize each of the different variable types, and you can just go ahead and fast forward to that section. I'll show you the syntax and you can be on your way. For those of you who are here for the entire video though, let's go ahead and start with what's probably the #1 collection type in UiPath, and that's going to be our data table variables. So as you can see, my data table, it's my variable here, is going to be of the type system.data.datatable. That's what my annotation is showing me. And the syntax for assigning a blank data table to this data table variable is extremely simple. It's simply going to be the word new, followed by a space, followed by the word data table. Very easy for data tables. This word new is something that you're going to see over and over again. So basically, when you're assigning an initial value to any type of collection variable, you're going to have to start with that word new. But it's what comes after where the syntax will vary from collection to collection. For data tables though, it's going to be super simple, simply new space data table. I will quickly mention that the way that I have this, so my data table equals new data table, is actually exactly the same as if I were to take a build data table activity like I did right here, go into the build data table wizard that comes with this activity, delete out all of the columns and rows that they had in that wizard, and then assign as an output the variable. So in this case, my data table variable that I have right there. So the way I've just set that up and my assign activity that I have up here are, for all intents and purposes, completely identical. You could use these interchangeably. All it's doing is assigning a blank data table to a previously null data table variable. They're exactly the same. Now for data tables, I'm not going to go into the details of how you could assign actual values within a data table in an assign activity like this. Since a data table is a matrix, you can have multiple columns, multiple rows. It gets a little bit complicated to do that kind of assigning, and especially since UiPath has all your built-in, your add rows, your add columns, your read from Excel type activities for your data tables. I'm not going to go into how to do that in an assign activity. I will probably in the future have a video where I go in depth into all of those different types of data table activities though, so keep your eyes out for that if you are interested in that. But for now, I'll go ahead and move on to our next collection type, which is going to be the array. So for the array, I have, for simplicity, for the rest of these collection types, I'll go ahead and state that up front, used strings as the default kind of easiest version of this. So this is going to be for an array of strings. Now you might have a different type of array that you're struggling with right now. It might be an array of integers, it might be an array of objects, etc., etc. There's all sorts of types of arrays you could have because it's just a collection of items. And realize that as you're looking at my syntax, it might not be exactly what you need, but you should be able to take the concepts you see here, tweak them a little bit to use for your purposes. So my array is of the type system.string, and these square brackets show that this is an array of strings. And if I look at the syntax that I need to use to assign values to that array, it's going to be like this. You can see it's the word new, followed by the type. So since I have a string, it's going to be of the string type. Yours might be integer, it might be object. It might have to be something more like system.data.something.object. If you have a more complicated data type that you haven't imported a namespace for, I'm not going to go into that here, but realize that what you have right here is going to be the data type of the items within your collection. For me, since I have an array of strings, it just says string. You've got some regular open closed brackets, and then you have your curly brackets, which is something you'll also see in most of my other assign activities for my collections. You open those curly brackets, and then within there is where you actually assign, separated by commas, the different values that you want in your array. So how you would read my actual syntax I have right here is I'm assigning this myArray variable as a new array with 3 items in it, and those items are going to be A1, A2, and A3 respectively. That is what that syntax says. Next, I have IEnumerables, and this is no accident. IEnumerable, even though this is a completely different variable type right here, you can see it's system.collections.generic.IEnumerable of system strings, again, an IEnumerable of strings. The syntax is going to be exactly the same as what we just saw for arrays. So new string, etc. And how you would read this is I am assigning a new IEnumerable collection of strings where the 3 values are going to be E1, E2, and E3. For lists, which is our 4th collection type, things get a little bit more complicated. So my variable, my list, is of the type system.collections.generic.list of system strings. You might have a different type of lists, but the syntax for that, as you can see here, it's a little bit more complicated. It's going to be new list, and then this is the first place where you're going to have to say the type of variable it is within your list. So if you have a list of integers, this would be where you put your integer type, followed by another open parentheses, the word new. Once again, you're going to have your type here. So rather than string, you'd put integer, just an open and closed regular parentheses. And then this is where you're going to have your curly brackets within which I will put the values. So reading this syntax, I am initializing a list of strings that are going to have the values L1, L2, and L3 and the first 3 items in that list collection. Finally, we have our dictionary collections. Dictionaries are a little bit more complicated in that they have both a key and a value as kind of a pair. So a dictionary is a series or a collection of pairs of values, which is why here in my annotation, you can see that the my dictionary collection is of the type system.collections.generic.dictionary system string, comma system string. So this is saying that both my keys and my values in this dictionary are strings. I'll let you go do research on dictionaries if you need more information on that. But the syntax that I'm going to have here, a little bit different from all of the others. You have new dictionary of, and once again, this first one is going to be the type of your key within your dictionary. The second one will be the type of the values within your dictionary. And then for whatever reason with dictionaries, you have to put a space, the word from, and then you're going to have a series of curly Q brackets. You're going to have some outer curly Q brackets as well as inner curly Q brackets that separate each of the different pairs of values and keys that you have. So in my situation, I have a dictionary with 3 pairs of values. Pair of value 1 is going to be key 1, value 1. Second pair is key 2, value 2. Third pair is key 3, value 3. So there you have it. In a nutshell, that is how you can initialize or assign some values to those different types of collection variables. And I will also quickly mention, this should be obvious for those of you who have been using UiPath at all, but you can also do these sort of initializations as the default values for a variable that you're going to use. So let's say that we have a data table variable. We want that data table variable to always have something in it. We don't want it to be null at any point during our workflow. We could go ahead and do what you can see right here in my workflow I've done. So in the second option 2 workflow, I've assigned my data table with a default value of new data table, which, as we just saw in, earlier, this is how you initialize a data table. So this would basically take the my data table variable from being null, and it would put a blank data table inside that variable. And that might sound similar. Those of you who have been programming for a while obviously know this, but I will go ahead and give a couple examples of why it can be important in your workflows to initialize collections like this. So in case you don't know this already, let's go ahead and use the my data table variable for an example. Let's say that I had a automation, and I'll make my automation here super simple, but you can think of how this could be used in a more complex automation where I have my data table, I have a message box, And my message box, I simply want it to show the number of rows in this data table. So my data table .rows.count, what that does is it should count the number of rows in my data table, output that in the message box that I have here. And I can see if I go ahead and run this activity right now. Oh, I'm sorry, I ran the wrong one there. Let me go ahead and run option 2. If I run the second piece right here, you can see I got my message box. It has 0 in it. That is the number of rows that are in the data table. And the reason it has 0 rows is I assigned a blank data table to that data table variable. There's no rows in it currently. So that's what I would anticipate. But let's say that I had not done what I did in this particular workflow, and I had not actually initialized the data table down here. So I did not put new data table as the default value for my data table variable. What would happen if I go ahead and attempt to run this project now? Well, let's do it again. Again, I haven't changed anything about this message box, but if I run this automation now, we'll see obviously not the message box showing me the number of rows that I have in my data table. Rather, it gives me this error saying the object reference is not set to an instance of an object. So basically what's happened here is since I didn't initialize that data table, my data table is currently null. It's not even a data table at all, if you want to think about it that way. And what that means is that UiPath can't look in that null value for rows. It can't count the rows in a null value. There are no rows. There's literally nothing about the null value that UiPath can do anything with. So as soon as it hits this little equation I have right here where I'm trying to get the rows and get the count of this data table, UiPath throws up its hand, says, I straight up can't do this for you. So that's one example of why you might need to initialize something like a data table with a new data table initialization. I'll go ahead and just give another quick example just to be sure to cement this idea. Let's say that I want to add an item to a collection. So I have down here the myList variable, which is a list of strings. Let's say that I want to add a new item to that list. If I use this add to collection activity, and since it's a list of strings, I should be able to just use this add to collection activity, put the argument over here as string type. So this is the myList variable that I'm trying to add something to. And let's say that for this value right here, I'll just say the first thing in my list of strings, I want it to say, this is the first item. All right. So I'm not getting any errors. I can go ahead and run this, and I'll actually run this in debug mode so we can see what's happening. Step into it here. You can see over in the left at this point, I haven't yet gone through this add to collection activity, and my myList variable right here, if we look at the value that it has over here in my locals panel, right now there is no value in that list. That list is empty, but it is initialized because over here I did set that as a new list of string using the initialization syntax that I showed us earlier. So it is an empty list. And if I now click step into one more time to get past this add to collections activities, go back and look at this myList activity over here in the locals panel, I can see it now contains one value because I added the string to that collection. This is the first item in this collection. Again, that's the string that I asked it to add. So my workflow worked perfectly fine. Now compare that to what will happen if I get rid of my initialization for this variable. So I'm just going to clear that out. My list is no longer going to be initialized before I hit this add to collections activity. I'll once again stepping into this activity. Now we should be able to see right here a difference. So previously, remember that my list had basically an empty list value over here. Now, rather than an empty list value, this says null. Again, basically, my list variable at this point, if you want to think about it this way, isn't even a list. It's a nothing. It's a nothingness. UiPath isn't going to be able to do anything with a nothingness. It's not going to be able to add something to a nothingness. It's just going to throw up its hand. So I'm going to do a step into activity, can immediately see it through an error. I'll go ahead and click step into a few more times so we can see that error large. And here we go, message the property collection add to collection is not initialized. So it's telling us right there what the problem is. My list was never initialized. UiPath is therefore unable to add to this collection, even though everything else about that activity is correct. Nothing about this activity changed. The only thing that changed was that I had not initialized the myList variable before I attempted to add to that collection. So there you have it. That's how you initialize different types of collection variables. That's how you assign values to different types of collection variables. Hopefully that's been helpful for you. If you did enjoy and appreciate this video, please do like. If you really appreciated the content and would like to see more of this, go ahead and click that subscribe button as well. And until next time, have a good time.